In this episode, we're going to focus on compute deployment, which is the moment cloud systems go from an idea to a running workload that can be attacked. Compute is where applications execute, where processes run, and where attackers often try to gain a foothold that lets them move laterally or steal data. A lot of security problems in the cloud start long before an incident, because they are baked into the way images are built, the way services are enabled by default, and the way patches are handled after launch. Beginners sometimes think security begins when you turn on monitoring, but good security begins earlier, at the time you create and deploy compute. The goal is to reduce the attack surface so there are fewer doors to try, and to keep systems updated so known weaknesses do not remain open. By the end, you should understand what it means to harden images, why reducing services matters, and how a reliable patch cadence keeps compute from drifting into risky, outdated states. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. To begin, it helps to define what compute means in cloud terms. Compute is any environment where code runs, including virtual machines, containers, and managed compute services that still execute your application logic. Regardless of the specific form, compute has an operating environment, installed software, configuration settings, and network exposure. Attackers care about compute because it provides execution, and execution is how they do most things, from collecting credentials to scanning internal networks. A secure compute deployment aims to limit what is available to an attacker if they ever reach the system, and to prevent easy entry in the first place. That is why we talk about hardening, service reduction, and patch cadence as three connected practices rather than separate chores. They all reduce risk by making the system smaller, more predictable, and easier to keep healthy over time. Hardened images are a foundational concept because images are the starting point for many compute deployments. An image is a pre-built template that includes an operating system, base packages, and sometimes application components. If the image is bloated, outdated, or poorly configured, every workload created from it inherits those weaknesses. Hardening an image means making careful choices about what is included and how it is configured so the default state is safer. That might include disabling risky defaults, setting secure configuration baselines, and ensuring only necessary components are present. The goal is not to make an image perfect, but to make it consistently safer than an uncurated template. Consistency matters because it reduces random variation, which makes security monitoring and maintenance much easier. One of the most important ideas in hardening is minimizing what is installed. Every installed package and every enabled feature is potential attack surface, meaning it creates code paths that could contain vulnerabilities. Beginners often assume that extra tools are harmless because they are not being used, but unused software can still be exploited if it contains a weakness and is reachable. A hardened image therefore avoids installing optional tools that are not required for the workload's purpose. It also avoids leaving debugging utilities or development components in production environments, because those components often increase exposure. When you keep images lean, you reduce the number of vulnerabilities you need to worry about and the number of things that can go wrong. Lean images also tend to patch faster because there is less software to update, which reinforces the value of minimization. Configuration hardening is the second part of image hardening, and it is where security intent is translated into default behavior. This includes setting secure defaults for things like authentication, logging, and network exposure. For example, a hardened configuration should avoid allowing remote administration interfaces to be reachable from broad networks. It should ensure that logging is enabled so that actions can be monitored and investigated later. It should also implement sensible file permissions and system settings that make privilege escalation more difficult. Beginners sometimes think configuration is a last-minute tweak, but when configuration is built into the image, every deployed system starts from a known secure baseline. That reduces the chance of inconsistent settings across systems, which is a common weakness attackers exploit. Reducing services is tightly related to hardening because many systems start with more services running than they truly need. A service is any background process that listens for requests, responds to network connections, or provides functionality to other processes. Every listening service is effectively a door because it accepts inputs that could be abused. If a workload does not need a service, running it only increases risk without providing benefit. Reducing services means disabling unnecessary listeners, removing unused components, and ensuring that only required ports are reachable. This practice is especially important in cloud environments where network exposure can change quickly through configuration mistakes. By reducing services at the operating system level, you create a second layer of protection even if network rules become overly permissive. Service reduction also improves detection and response because it makes abnormal behavior more obvious. If a workload normally runs only a small set of processes, then a new listening service or unexpected outbound connection stands out. If a workload has dozens of unnecessary background services, distinguishing normal from abnormal becomes much harder. Attackers also benefit from clutter because they can hide malicious processes among many legitimate ones. A lean service profile means fewer opportunities for an attacker to exploit a vulnerable service and fewer places to hide. It also supports faster incident containment because the system's intended function is clearer. The simpler the compute workload, the easier it is to protect. Patch cadence is the third pillar because even hardened, minimal systems will eventually become vulnerable as new weaknesses are discovered. Patch cadence means having a consistent rhythm for applying updates to the operating environment and critical software components. Beginners sometimes think patching is a one-time task, but it is an ongoing requirement because vulnerabilities are continuously found and exploited. A reliable cadence reduces the window of exposure between when a vulnerability becomes known and when your system is protected. In cloud environments, this is especially important because attackers often target known weaknesses that can be exploited at scale. If your environment lags behind on updates, attackers can automate their attacks and compromise many systems quickly. A key concept in patch cadence is distinguishing between routine updates and urgent fixes. Routine updates might occur on a predictable schedule, such as weekly or monthly, while urgent fixes may be applied out of cycle when a critical vulnerability is actively exploited. A mature patch cadence includes both, because security cannot wait for the calendar when risk is high. However, patching also has operational consequences, such as potential downtime or compatibility issues. That is why patch cadence should be designed to fit business reality while still reducing risk meaningfully. The important beginner takeaway is that patching is a risk management decision, not just a technical procedure. Good cadence balances speed, stability, and confidence. In cloud compute deployment, patch cadence is often most effective when combined with image lifecycle management. If you build hardened images, you can update those images regularly and deploy new compute from the updated versions. That approach avoids patching every running instance manually and helps keep systems consistent. It also reduces drift, which is the gradual divergence of systems over time as different patches and changes are applied inconsistently. Drift makes investigation harder because two systems that should be identical behave differently. When images are updated and redeployed consistently, the environment stays closer to a known standard. This predictability supports monitoring, troubleshooting, and compliance evidence. Another part of securing compute deployment is ensuring that patching does not become optional due to convenience. Attackers love forgotten systems, such as old instances left running for testing or temporary workloads that become permanent by accident. These systems often miss patches and become easy entry points. A strong compute deployment practice includes visibility into what is running and a process to retire workloads that are no longer needed. Even a perfect patch cadence cannot protect what you do not know exists. That is why deployment discipline matters, because secure compute is not just about building well, but also about managing what has been built. Consistent inventory and lifecycle management support patch cadence by ensuring nothing slips through. It is also important to understand that hardening and service reduction can reduce the urgency pressure on patching, but they do not replace it. A minimal system has fewer vulnerabilities, but it can still have critical ones, especially in core components. Hardening can prevent some exploit paths, but it cannot eliminate all weaknesses. Patching is the mechanism that removes known vulnerabilities from the environment. When all three practices work together, they reinforce each other. Hardened images start safer, reduced services create fewer doors, and patch cadence closes known gaps over time. This layered approach is more resilient than relying on any single defense. Beginners often look for one magic control, but durable security comes from complementary practices. In the broader story of cloud security monitoring and response, secure compute deployment is prevention that makes detection easier and incidents less severe. If compute workloads are consistent, minimal, and up-to-date, attacker movement becomes harder and abnormal behavior becomes more visible. That supports stronger alerts and faster investigations, because baseline behavior is clearer. If an attacker does gain access, a hardened environment may limit what they can do, slowing them down and reducing blast radius. That time and limitation can be the difference between a small contained incident and a major breach. Secure deployment is therefore not separate from monitoring. It is the foundation that makes monitoring more effective. To wrap up, securing compute deployment in the cloud starts before the workload ever runs. Hardened images ensure that every deployment begins from a safer baseline, reducing inherited weaknesses and promoting consistency. Reducing services minimizes the number of doors an attacker can try and makes unexpected behavior easier to spot. Enforcing a patch cadence keeps known vulnerabilities from lingering and reduces the attacker's opportunity to exploit widely documented weaknesses. Together, these practices shrink attack surface, reduce drift, and create a more predictable environment that is easier to monitor and defend. When you treat compute deployment as a security-critical process rather than a simple launch action, you build resilience into your cloud from the start. That sets up the next step, where immutable infrastructure patterns can further shrink the window attackers have to persist inside workloads.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.